I'd like to welcome everyone to the Budget and Finance Town Hall. Presenting today is my name's Chuck Unruh, Vice President of Finance, and I'll be presenting along with Alan Priest, President, and Carol Meyer, our Executive Director. Next. What we'd like to accomplish is to review the budget from last year and some actual numbers, and look at this year's budget, the 2021 budget proposal. All delegates should have received on this call a copy of our proposed budget. Afterwards, I'll introduce the indemnification policy for volunteer trustees and investment advisors. And at number 4, we'll propose to modify the bylaws related to the membership structure and the dues. And then we'll take questions at the end of this seminar. I want to look at 2014 to 2019 net assets. Currently, our numbers from last year are with the auditors. We don't have a firm number as of today. It looks like our net assets rose again, continuing the trend. This is a phenomenal result. When we think that in 2014, we were worth $44,000, and today we're at $2.7 million, along with almost $3 million in liquidity or portfolio assets. That's amazing growth. And the growth line, even with a weak last quarter when it came to membership revenues, has held firm. So last year we finished positive. We don't know the exact numbers until they come back from the auditors.
And Chuck, let me interject here. The audit will not be finished by next weekend.
Okay.
COVID situations have certainly slowed down that area of business, which I'm painfully aware of. And some of our IT conversion issues have slowed us down on getting information to them. So our call is to have it by the end of September. That's the bylaws motion, not bylaws, no, delegates motion, I believe. And we're on track to do that, but it's not going to be ready by 15.
The amazing part, and I'd like to put this in the record, is we'll finish with a surplus. And that is an overall surplus, including our capital budget. I'm ready for the next slide. Some highlights from 2019 and 20. An extraordinary year. We actually expanded the business model, the mission, and our membership revenues were a little bit lighter than the budget for the year. We were off by about $127,000 in membership revenue, but still we finished at 1.9 million. It appeared to us that membership was light about 26% through the worst of March. And as we remember, the worst of March was March 23rd, when the markets were falling apart. The restricted gifts, phenomenal this year. Multiples of 6 or 7 what we expected. Events came in at 685,000. Donations were strong. You can see all of it that'll tie to the last year actuals and communications, royalty, everything was normal. Payroll came in approximately at budget, and we spent $974,000 approximately on programs. This next item is a huge item. We had a capital budget, and our capital budget said we would spend money that was not in the operations budget. Well, the capital budget was $690,470 actual. That's what we spent. And we paid for this out of savings from previous years. None of the reserve funds were touched during this period. We still have those rainy day funds as we keep with the coronavirus in the pandemic. So when we look at things and we add in 690,000 worth of paid expenses into last year, and they're done, that is very, very strong to still finish with a surplus. G&A speaks for itself, 670,000 to run the G&A. Some of that we'll talk about in the upcoming budget, because not only are we decreasing revenue, but we're keeping many of our expenses the same. And we'll talk about that as we go on to the expense slides. Magazine payroll, we put that out separately. What does it cost to run our magazine? What does it cost for our governance? These were actuals from last year. So it was a good year. 2019, 2020, well, probably an excellent year, not just good. Next slide, please. Here was a revenue for 1920. What's unusual, and this revenue will tie to the actuals, what we think are the actuals. So we see the 1.9 million in membership revenue, very important to US Chess. Membership is still our primary revenue source. But up here at 1.119 million, or call it 1,120,000 approximately, donations, endowments, sponsorships. We have had very generous sponsorship, very generous people to chess and to the future of chess. And we'll talk a little more about our endowments later on in the budget. But it was a very strong year. And the normal revenue sources, like the 120,000, that's a royalty. You can follow along. These are the summaries for that year. Can we go to the next slide, please? Expenses 1920, nothing unusual. Payroll is roughly, I want to say 40%, 30% in that year. The unusual part, of course, came in the last 3 months. In the last 3 months was all about the virus, about not able to continue over the board play. Next slide, please. In the 2021 budget, we have some highlights. We're going to reduce our membership projections by 30%. Why? Well, the last 3 months of the year, we saw at least a 26% decrease. Now, is that firm? Well, there are some things going on internally, such as online play, that really may speak to better membership projections. But this is our best forecast going forward, with the only 3 months worth of data during the beginning of the pandemic. Projected revenue reductions for rating fees, TLAs, advertising, all that is linked to our over-the-board play. Some reduced royalty payments due to cancellations. But at the same time we talk about that, we have to talk about our expenses becoming less. We believe that even with this forecast, that we'll come in at a 107,000 deficit. So we're used to having surpluses, but we're currently going to project a very conservative budget. And with that budget, we believe that we'll have 107,000. And that's without relinquishing any services. Services will remain relatively the same. In fact, we're adding the service of online play. Our largest expense, of course, is payroll. Well, payroll this year is actually less than last year. And unfortunately, with the health news from Susan Cantor, payroll is actually down. We will miss her dearly. but our payroll projections for this year are decreased from last year, plus we're short-staffed going into this. Programs, of course, programs include most of our all over-the-board tournaments. We think that we're going to continue those sometime next spring. We don't know for sure. How fast will they reopen the schools? Where is the pandemic at that time? I don't have those answers. I married into medicine because I didn't know anything about medicine. Still don't. So, magazine, we had that up there, our expense. What does it cost for Chess Life? Just to print, mail, we have a Chess Life payroll. It's expensive, and we'll be addressing that a little later. So our projected deficit is right now at 100, call it 108,000. And for the type of sudden stop in the economy, that's a good number. I think that we'll come in on that number. Maybe it's a little bit of under promise, over deliver, but I'd be surprised if we can't meet that deficit.
Chuck, I'd like to add that that magazine expense line does not include payroll for the magazine. That the payroll on the top bullet under expenses is inclusive of all staff.
And
the magazine, the magazine is mailing and printing. That's what that 400 is.
So here's what it looks like in the forecast. In comparison to the last 3 years, notice we were down in 2019 actual by 5.5%. That's those last 3 months we were talking about. And we're projecting somewhere, we said 30% actual, based on these numbers, call it 33. And this is just a graphic representation of the last 3 years, and then the forecast. So let's move to the next chart, which should be, this is what it looks like on the chart. If we graph the years together, notice the two major elements of this are scholastic memberships and regular memberships. And we'll be discussing those later in the membership revenue motion that we have coming forward. So it tracks. We're fairly consistent. If we should come out of the pandemic, why wouldn't we return to the numbers of the last 4 years? Well, I don't see a reason we wouldn't approach. We may not return to the exact numbers, but it would be quite the windfall. So this is what it looks graph-wise. And that was from the chart, previous table charted out. So I'm ready for the next slide. Wow, here's what it looks like, revenues in the summary. And this summary should tag into and be represented by the revenue, the budget revenue that we sent with the delegates package. This is what it looks like on the pie chart. And once again, even at 1.4 million, it is still our largest revenue. What's that? Membership revenue. Even with the decrease of 30 to 33%, we're projecting 1.4 million for next year. Sponsorships? Don't know. We're not as bullish on sponsorships as last year. Last year was a phenomenal year, but I think that we'll see a little better than what we have on the chart at 168.8. So next slide, please. Here are the revenues actually broken down and in detail as to what 1% relates to. I had, in a previous chart, I had names by all these. Made it easier. Oh well, but this is the actual breakdown. It's the same thing as what we had on the summary, but a little more detail. Let's go to the next chart. Here's the expense budget. Now we can actually see the parts of the expense budget. I'm going to point out something in the budget. Down here where it says credit card charges, 3%. Well, that's almost $90,000. If we do not continue over the board chess, those credit card charges are likely to come down. Those are processing fees for membership. As membership attenuates, those charges will also attenuate. So some of our expenses are possibly a little high in the budget because we're budgeting for the coronavirus to go away in 2021 and a more return to normal. As always, our payroll is our largest part, but it's reasonable. I want to say payroll this year is 30%, 40%. It's 40%, which is, from the businesses that I have, is a normal amount to run a business. So we've looked at all these. And this is the detail. Once we looked at all the different components, what it will take to keep our structure, because they announce a vaccine Monday. We'll need our structure in place to meet demand as it comes in the spring tournaments. Next slide, please. This is a summary that ties to, this is a summary of expenses, and it ties to the tables that we presented in the budget we presented to the delegates. This is the consolidated or summary. There's our payroll, 40%. Next slide, please. Wow, if this is right, if I can get my zoom out of the way, this is 1997. What is interesting about 1997? We were in the books and equipment business. Everything seemed to be going great. The point of this chart is 2 years later, we were in trouble as an organization. Always, we cannot become complacent. We're watching the numbers. The finance teams are in place. Every day we look at our investments. The concept is when times are good, don't become complacent. Membership even then was 1.6 million. So our forecast today is the lowest membership since 1996 at least. And that's, we're taking the virus seriously. Next slide, please. And with that, I wanted to talk about something. Our investments started out, our liquid investments started out about $500,000. And that was our portfolio with TD Ameritrade. Then it was Scotch Trade, better known as a life member asset portfolio. We structured and had the life member assets. Today, we have an RF, which is reserve fund of 1.45 million. And on top of that, our endowment fund is doing very well thanks to generous donations and sponsors. And it's at 838,000 this morning. Quick addition says that under management in stock programs and by financial teams, somewhere between $2.8 and $2.9 million and growing. To give an idea, last week with the markets roaring back, added another 18,000 to our stock accounts. Dividends are now over 100,000. This is a very serious business going forward. No one doubts that it's serious. And many times we'll have invited in talent that is not a delegate, perhaps not on the board. They're not indemnified from their choices. And if they should be sued just to defend themselves might cost $5,000 to $10,000 even after dismissing a lawsuit. In good faith, I propose that we indemnify our trustees to the extent of the law. Means if they're doing something that's not right, they're not covered. It has to be within the scope of their duties. And I'm offering this policy, the board is offering the policy to, in good faith, have a policy that indemnifies them against what I would call frivolous lawsuits. And that is the extent. We'll go to the next slide.
On the indemnification for just a minute, currently the bylaws provide that directors of the organization and delegates have a director, have certain director duties that as long, and Illinois law provides that for volunteers with a nonprofit, that as long as you're executing your fiduciary duty and you're doing things in a reasonable and prudent manner, that you're not going to be subject to suit. That doesn't mean you're not going to get sued. It just means that it's likely to get, it's going to get dismissed. When we had a former board member who was trying to run for election 9 or 10 years ago, and some of the rules had been changed about nomination papers, and he failed to comply with those and was left off the ballot. He sued the individual directors, he sued the organization, he sued me, although I wasn't involved. Don't know why he sued me except to be harassing. And in that case, we took it to Illinois court, and all of the parties except the organization itself were dismissed, which is what that's supposed to be. In this particular case, I wasn't dismissed, I just never was served. So this is an attempt to make sure that folks who don't otherwise have by position indemnification will have at least that assurance that the organization will cover them to get them removed from any lawsuits. And as Chuck said, if folks do something that's not prudent, something that is illegal, it wouldn't cover them for that, just like the regular Illinois provision does not.
I put it in the way on our investment teams and trustees, we want the best people that money can't buy. So let's support them.
The membership and dues bylaws change proposal really has two parts to it. One is it changes the membership structure. Right now, we have a whole bunch of categories. There's multiple options under each category. You know, there's 4 membership options for adults, 4 for young adults, 4 for regular, a year or 2, magazine or not. Some of them are not consistent with that. Seniors, for example, don't have anything but the 1 and 2 year category. We have a young adult category that ends up ensnaring high school seniors. It extends up to age 26, but our family dues policies cut off at age 24. So what this proposal does is to try to simplify the dues structure, combine some age group categories, change ages so that they make, they're consistent across some of the different categories and reducing the overall number. With the dues, we want to adjust those to a bit. So as we combine and consolidate different choices, we've come in and merged those dues together. We've created a situation where the magazines become an add-on. Rather than a separate dues choice, they become an additional item. That gives a member some options. They can pick whichever magazine and subscribe to whichever magazine they wish. Right now, you know, if you're a really high level 11-year-old, you get Chess Life for Kids. You might want Chess Life instead. If you're an adult member, who's primarily working with kids, you might want to get Chess Life for Kids because those are the people you primarily deal with. Right now, you don't get that option. Presently, we do make digital subscriptions available with all memberships. That would continue, and we would make all of those folks, every member, have access to both magazines digitally. Life memberships, of course, are not affected by this change. Life members have the option to receive a print magazine. In fact, they get it unless they've opted out. We do have some folks who've opted out of a print magazine that are life members, and we've had some others where we couldn't find them that we sort of put their membership on hold for a bit. The further down, there's some sections that are further down in the membership. We haven't changed those sections, so they're not listed in the proposal. And the proposed effective date for this, often when we've changed dues, the effective date has been January 1. This change is large enough, we've made the change effective with the next fiscal year, which is June 1. That means that whether this passes or not, it doesn't affect the budget that Chuck just presented because none of the revenue changes that are proposed under this would have an impact on 2021. The dues proposal goes into effect after that. The overall, there is a requirement that the delegates have that anything that affects revenue and costs needs to have economic analysis. An economic analysis on the dues change a little bit hard because we don't, it's a very unusual time for our membership. But if we go back and look at the averages over pre-COVID times, if all of the things being equal, revenue would bump up a couple $100,000 by this change. So it's not a massive revenue change, but it does amount to about 10% overall. But that will be affected by who picks what dues category. So we will, on the next slide, the original dues changes are right here. We get rid of regular and premium categories and just move to one with memberships able to purchase Chess Life or Chess Life for Kids separately. And the proposal calls for that to be done at 105% of the direct production cost. So that's mailing and printing. It's not fixed at a particular dollar because mailing and printing choices change. Now, we've committed that that would be fixed over the course of a year. We're not, if you buy a year subscription, we're not changing the price in the middle of it. But, periodically as our magazine costs or as our mailing costs change, we'll have to change that. The original proposal collapsed youth and scholastic into one category and also pulled in the younger 2 years of the young adult. So young adult started when you were 18 years old. What that caused is we caused some kids in high school, particularly high school seniors, to see a dues increase as they were high school seniors. This change brings conceivably everyone who would be eligible to play in a scholastic setting into the same dues categories. And it does mirror with how this was done before. We had adult, youth, and senior. But it does expand to age 19 at expiration. The rate reduces the rate for some members, increases it for some others, but it was done with a blending of the percentages that are in each category. Large chunk of the people in this category are regular members. They've not taken the magazines. 80 to 85% of the members in these three categories are not taking a magazine right now. The senior bumps up just a little, but what does change is right now the senior comes with the magazine, now it would not. So senior members who want to get the magazine they won't see a dues change, so they will have to add that magazine on separately. It's about 50-50. A bunch of our seniors do not take the magazine. And then family, they get it, but they don't request it. Family plan rates go up a little bit. Now, we did have some feedback from our prior town hall and from our Scholastic meeting. So originally when we did this, we had kept a young adult membership in there. The board chose not to include it in the final proposal. I think the sentiment that we've been hearing is to add this back in. Changes from the current young adult membership. The current younger membership starts at age 18, goes to age 26 at expiration. We've said, okay, we're going to be, if you're under age 24 at expiration, that'll match with the age cutoff in the family membership. And by age 24, most folks have had ample opportunity to get out of school. So that's we're trying to match those years up. The rate on this is $1 higher than the current regular rate. And again, some 80 to 85% of our young adult members end up in the regular category anyway. So the folks who want to add the magazine, they'll be adding it on top of that. So the rate changes are relatively modest. If you go to the next one, to the next slide. When we've talked about this, why do we need to make these changes? Well, the last time the dues were raised was in 2015, and that was only in some categories. Since the last full change in 2008, inflation has significantly reduced its purchasing power. If we had just kept adult dues consistent over time, we would be more like $60, and we're not there. So it's, we're holding the line, but we've got to periodically increase some revenue. The last several years, we talked about it, and folks said times were too good to increase dues. Now folks say times are too bad. Well, times will be good and times will be bad. Over time, we've just got to build in some changes. Other folks do too. And part of the issue with the virus is we have not made this effective until next June. The overall membership categories, there were some 20. Now we go to 10 if we add back the young adult, actually 11 because there's 2 under young adult, 1 year and 2 year. You get more flexibility to choose your magazine. Our Scholastic age print magazine choices, there's only about 20% of them that get it. As I mentioned, when we add back in the young adult category, now we've got some harmony in the ages. They both cut off at 24. We've got kids in a school program who will all be eligible for the same dues structure rather than taking high school seniors and forcing them to pay more. They will also be able to qualify for the group membership program. Now, the group membership program is a promotional membership. We have not changed the rate on that pretty much since we made everybody aware of it. That is under the control of the EB. Do I think the group membership rates may go up before long? Since they haven't changed in years, they may well. They're not going to go up, I think, by a whole lot, but the group membership program will expand the number of people that can be covered under it. This is what I was referring to before. The next slide. If we adjust membership dues for inflation, what we have actually seen is a drop. This sets the current at $49, and we've gone back to show what it would have been. If we'd have just kept the same rate we'd have had at age 70 in 1970 rather, and adjusted it for inflation, we'd be at $66. If we had the total that we had in the year 2000 and kept it consistent for inflation, we'd be at 60 on adult dues with the magazine. We have increased life membership dues to a degree over that time while we've kept the adult premium dues dropping. So that's the reason for making the change, for proposing the change. Again, we have held these events and we've been listening. I think the sentiment is there to still have a young adult category. Changing it and adding it back in, it reduces the net revenue from the proposal by about, my estimate is $15,000, and it may not be that. like I said, we had a chunk of the people in the young adult category who were already getting a dues decrease, and they're not affected by adding the young adult category back. So, how many will really be affected by that? It's 3,000 people, maybe, because we don't have I don't have a breakdown in age of the people in the young adult category, but I know it skews younger. I know there's a bigger percentage of them which are high school kids in the younger 2 years of that membership, age 18 and 19. So those folks are going to see a dues increase, but I'm okay with having an amount for the college students. I think we said that in the first town hall, so that's why we've added that back in. We are going to add that as an amendment to it. Our parliamentarian says that that's a germane item and we can just adjust it. That's what we would do if we were meeting in person. We'd talk about it in workshops and maybe come up with some ideas to change things. So we had that conversation just this week with the board and came up with that additional proposal. So with that, I think we presented everything that we wanted to present, and we need to open it up and let you all ask questions. Right before we do that, there are some more town halls coming up. We're in the last push because our meeting starts on Saturday. So this week we have three items for town hall meetings. 2 of them are substantive issues that are on the agenda. One of them is just how do you get into the program and how's it going to operate, how are Robert's rules going to operate. But Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings, we have these starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. And then, of course, we will start Saturday at noon Eastern for our special delegates meeting. So with that, we're going to open up the floor for questions. The way that you do that is in the participants block down there at the bottom of your screen, depending on how your screen's organized, you should be able to get a participants list. And if you go on the participants list, you should have the ability to raise your hand. And so if you have questions, please inquire.
Looks like Ken Ballou has his hand up.
Thank you. May I ask if the budget for next year presumes that supernationals will happen?
Yes,
And
yes, the budget actually has both the K-12 grades and supernationals as happening as planned.
I'm known for being something of a pessimist, but I seriously doubt that the K-12 grades will happen this year. I think that supernationals is a serious toss-up. I won't go into reasons why I believe that, though I'm happy if asked to answer. I'm wondering if we have any plan for what happens if those tournaments do not happen.
So the answer is sort of. So we've been discussing internally a number of scenarios, both with the K-12 grades and to a lesser extent with supernationals. Clearly, we are getting better at running events online. We have been in regular communication with the Rosen property that the K-12 grades is scheduled at, and they understand better than anyone, I would say, what the difficult challenges that we face as an organization in bringing 1,800 people together to play chess in a confined space. They have sent us in writing that we would not be held to any attrition penalties should our numbers be lower. So one scenario could be that we run an event that's much reduced in size. Obviously, another scenario is that we don't have the event because of circumstances in the local community, as well as for fear of spreading the virus through travel and the like. So, I think it's too early to make a decision, and we will, come around on that just as quickly as we can, weighing all the factors as we did with the spring events and working with the properties where we had the events scheduled to ensure that there's no negative side effects back to US Chess.
There is one thing about that. I get questioned frequently from people who have this misconception, however, that US Chess lives and dies on net proceeds from these scholastic tournaments, and that's simply not true. For example, we lost the Spring Nationals this year. The National Scholastic Series in a normal year nets $70,000 to $80,000 total, which in turn we spend on international youth play, in supporting people who have what we have called individual rights to the World Youth, World Cadet, Pan American, some of these different events, under 16 Olympiad. We spend every bit of that and sometimes more. So this year, when we lost the Spring Nationals, from a bottom line standpoint, if we look at it over a 2-year period, FIDE canceled those international youth events here in 2020. So we certainly took a net hit over on the fiscal year ended in May. But if we look at it as a whole, it was sort of a push. Now, looking at 2021, the Super Nationals tends to be more profitable to US Chess than are the 3 events separately if they're held in the spring. Super Nationals bottom line tends to total more than the combined bottom lines of the elementary, junior high, and senior. If we lose it, it's not good, but it's not a horrible killer, and it's still kind of a push if those international youth events don't happen next year. And I think those, I think if the situation is such that the Super Nationals may not be able to be held in May, then I think it is also a possibility that those international youth events may not be able to happen later on in the year. And even if they do, given some of the circumstances right now, while other countries may be able to participate, I'm not sure we will be able to. Certainly that exists today in some areas of Europe. You're going to have people crossing national boundaries to participate in events while you can't get there from here because of our situation with the virus right now. And that's not meant to be a political statement, just a statement of fact. Do I think that'll be the same at this time next year? I hope it isn't. But, we're just going to have to see. Ken, I do share your concerns about whether that event will be able to happen or not. But we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. And bottom line is, it's not a horrible killer if it doesn't happen. It's not like we are counting on those events to make the payroll. And we do have a rainy day fund. The next hand I see up is Chris Prosser. So,
yes, just a question about the magazine subscriptions. Right now, we have a difference between the regular membership and the premium membership to pay for those magazines. Once we get rid of that premium membership, are we going to try to keep those magazine subscriptions to that same price difference? If not, then we're raising rates for people who want the magazine. That's an even higher dues increase for them. Just wondering if we're going to try to keep that magazine price down.
That's a good price. That's a good question, Chris. Right now, I think when we've looked at it, we think that the Chess Life rate will be in the neighborhood of $10, maybe 11 or 12, but it'll be in that ballpark. Which the difference in the 2 rates right now is 9. For the scholastic ones, the differences are generally 8-ish. And that likely is to be more like 6 or 7 because Chess Life for Kids only comes out 6 times a year. So I think we will see maybe a little bit more increase for the Chess Life side. And I think we'll see a decrease in the difference on the Chess Life for Kids side right now, given the cost we have today. Now, Tell me what the Postal Service is going to do in 6 months, and I'll tell you how long we'll keep to that, right? Because God only knows where postal rates will head, particularly if you've been following the news about the Postal Service at all lately. Now, that would be a reality for us regardless. We could be coming back next year if we still had the regular and premium structure and having to expand that premium amount significantly if they triple our magazine's mailing rates. But it cost us a little less than $1 a piece to print to get Chess Life out. So, I mean, just a little less. So if we're in that $10 to $12 range, that pretty much covers the cost at present. Hope that answered the question. I see John's hand up.
Yeah, given current projections, do you anticipate any staff layoffs in the near or far distant future?
I'll take that one and then I'll hand it off to Carol. The honest answer to that is we might see some, but they're happening by attrition right now. And we have some changes in our systems that will allow us to move some people around. So we might not need quite as many folks. Let me give you an example. Of course, unfortunately, we had Susan's unfortunate passing, and she's in a position we desperately need to have somebody in that position. So even while she's been off ill, we've had Corey Cormick in there on a contract basis doing some work, and he's stayed in there in a contract basis, and his hours have been expanded a bit. We had a customer service rep who's decided that who's in Crossville, who decided that she was ready to retire. Some of our people in Crossville have moved there because they've had a retirement and then they've looked for something to do. And that was certainly the case here. Will we add that person back in? Maybe not today. Right now, TLAs have been a full-time job, almost a full-time job for somebody. And in the new system that we have, we're expecting that TLAs won't take nearly as much time. Why is it a full-time job? Because stuff is submitted in a text box, and then if you want to put it in the format for an email blast, it's got to all be retyped. If you want to put it into the magazine in a different way, it's got to all be retyped. So every time it changes one system to another, it has to be redone. So as that comes on board, then hopefully it's going to free some time up for somebody that we can use in a different way. And so as we have some other opportunities to do stuff, we're thinking we may not have to bring somebody in. We've been very fortunate that we were on top of the PPP situation. The very first day that applications were accepted, we had an application in. We received some $220,000 under that program, which helped us support our staff up through the end of June. And as I said, we haven't changed anybody's employment status as a result of financial issues. We have had a couple of people who have, left us for some other reasons. And so we'll see. I'm hopeful we don't. We're trying to preserve everybody on the team, because if we can turn the corner on the virus thing, we're going to need them. Maybe a few different skills than what we have now, but we're going to need them. So our goal is to keep the team intact, and as we can find some opportunities to free up some hours, look for opportunities to use those people in some other areas. Carol, I kind of took and ran with that. You may not want to add anything at all, and that's fine, but do you have anything?
No, I think the point that you made at the end, Alan, about, skills, clearly certainly in the time I've been with US Chess and, started under my predecessor, Gene Hoffman, this organization has been, undergoing an evolution. And that evolution requires new and different skills. We have been moving people around. One example of that is Jen Jihadi had been our digital editor. Now she's directing a program. And so we are trying to meet those needs with existing staff. At some point, we may not be able to do that because the skills just don't exist on staff. But I think Alan summed up where we're at, pretty spot on. And there were a couple of retirements we didn't expect, which gives us some flexibility now to perhaps repurpose those roles, redefine those roles in a way that makes more sense for US Chess in 2020-21 than it did in 1990 or 95. So in some ways, I feel like I've been handed a gift to have some flexibility to look at our profile strategically and see what we can do to better meet the needs of our members as well as meet the mission that our board has set in motion.
Our personnel budget has not been adjusted from what we adopted back before the beginning of the fiscal year for these personnel changes that have occurred. So we're still funding those positions right now. And that's kind of something we've done in the past. We funded positions that didn't fill them. Right now, the budget had been set basically for the team that we had, and now we're down at least one full FTE, maybe a little more than that, maybe 1.5. So we'll see how that goes. We have any other questions? Did that answer your question, John?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. You have any other questions? Anybody else need some more would like to get some more information? Now's your chance. There we go. John, you got your hand up again.
How you think the web upgrade is gone?
Well,
I'll take that one, Alan.
Yeah, let me cue it up for you, though. This has been a major project. I can't state enough, and it's changing things that people don't see a lot. What we've done basically is everything that we had, all the data resided in stuff that Mike Nolan had created. He had migrated it from one language to another, but it really needed to be moved again into something a little bit more modern. And one of the problems with the system that we had in place is it had a single point of failure, and that was Mike. If Mike got hit by a bus, we had some problems because some of the language that it was in, computer languages get antiquated. If you want to find somebody who speaks certain languages, you really have to hunt hard for them. It's the same thing in computer world. So it needed to get changed. It would have been great if we could have been in the middle of phase 2. We put phase 2 on hold because of the uncertainty with the virus. We also had moved some stuff from phase 2 to phase 1 because there were some changes that made some sense to go ahead and incorporate now, and that overall would reduce the cost of the project. And phase 2, quite frankly, we're still developing some of the needs and requirements there. But so far, I think it's gone pretty well. Now, Carol, I'm going to hand that off to you and let you cover more detail than I did.
So, there's been more issues post-launch than we would have liked. We wound up pushing up against our announced launch date where we didn't get first versions of some code to even test until the night before we went live. And in retrospect, we probably should have delayed the launch by a couple of weeks, but we really wanted to live up to the dates that we had announced. I know that TLAs are now available for members to use. My understanding is that the batch membership, which seems to be the source of most of the problems for our organizers and tournament directors, that is in testing, and I'm not going to put a date on it, but it should be like imminently available and working as it should. And that will take a lot of the pressure off of our membership services team, who has been working through a many-week backlog of these things, having to type in hundreds of memberships for organizers from events that they're running. The voucher program, I think we're a couple weeks away from that going live. And then, what we're also seeing now that it's just a month, we went live, I think, on the 10th of July, 9th or 10th of July. And I would say more than half of the issues people are continuing to have is that they aren't following the guidance we gave them. And so when someone tries to use their old credentials to log into the new system, they don't work. And they get frustrated, and they, so we're resharing the information that was in the blog post or went out via email, and getting on the phone with people as needed to help them get through that initial setup. One of the things we didn't anticipate is, and we have a couple of board members who this was the case too, is that if your email address is linked to more than one member record, it's not going to let you follow the simple procedure for setting up your new login in the system. Now,
I was one of those.
yeah, you fill out a form, and it's very simple, but it requires an extra step. And that particular factor, when you consider that coaches sign up a lot of kids, that really tripped a lot of people up. And I think we're past the worst of that, and our staff knows how to assess those situations to make sure people are getting the right set of initial instructions to go ahead. We've gotten some wonderful feedback. People like the dashboard view. They like, being able to do things from a single screen. And hopefully the problems with it running slow are behind us. It seems like last week was much better than the week before. Now, having been at this for a year, I would hire the same development group again if that's, any part of the answer. They have been responsive. They've put all hands on deck when needed, and we've been really, really fortunate, I think, to find a group that's been so attentive to our needs, and we look forward to working with them as we launch phase 2.
And at the risk of maybe doing a little bit TMI here, I'll give you an example of working with the developer. Part of our contract with them said that our debugging and stuff after it goes live would cover the first couple of weeks were covered. Then after that, we paid for it. They've continued to do it covered. I think they recognize some of the code got in late, so they've continued to do it at their expense and not bill us for time. And so, when you have somebody like that who partners with you and who is looking, you get the feeling they're trying to make sure you're successful rather than just lining their own pockets. And that's a good feeling, I think.
We were looking for a long-term relationship with a provider, and I think we've found that. So apologize for the frustrations and the backlog that our membership staff has been, working through. I can assure you they're all working extra hours to get through it. And I think this next week is going to be a turning point for us, because I anticipate some of the snags will be worked out. We are losing Sharon McClure after Tuesday, as she announced her retirement a few weeks ago. So we'll be down a person. But I think, the all hands on deck approach has been serving us very well.
Carol, I'd like to point out something that the board has adopted in the net asset value. Phase one and these upgrades are unique to US chess. So we adopted the most conservative financial position possible, which is to say that in our capital budget, the value is 0. So on the net asset graph that we saw, one of the first graphs, that is with the phase one $690,000 at 0 capital value. It doesn't get much more conservative.
I'll translate that in accountant speak. We expensed it.
Okay, thanks.
There are a couple of things by having to delay phase two. We're having to maintain a slice of our older system longer than we had planned and longer than we would like. We still have an issue sometimes where we're a little more dependent on the power supply in Crossville than we would like. A lot of our servers are up in the cloud and they're not in Crossville, but we do have some stuff there. Which the stuff in the cloud is a lot more redundancy, and if stuff happens in a particular area, there's multiple service centers and the providers just switch them around. We still have a single point in Crossville with an appliance where the data gets routed through, and when the power is down in Crossville or something like that happens, we have system outages. And Crossville not being a major metropolitan area, sometimes their system, their grid reliability is lower than what you'd like. It's a polite way to put it. So, so sometimes when you're seeing some system outages, it's because there's power out in Crossville. And sometimes it doesn't take very long, and sometimes it can be out for an extended period of time. The good news is, in what we're doing, as much as people would like to be able to access it right this minute, we're not doing brain surgery. So I don't want to minimize it, but you know, I really don't want to minimize it. But again, if we're out for a little bit of time, nobody dies. It's just terribly inconvenient. That is one good thing about the timing, I guess, if you want to call it that, on virus stuff, is our volume was lower. We chose to do the implementation and set the target date at this time of year because it was after some major events and it was before some others. There was an area when we looked at the time of year when things tend to be slower than anything else, it was right now. And then because of the virus, it was slower still. So that did help us to get the implementation going in a way that probably had a little less impact on our end users than it normally would. Are there other questions? John? Hold on a minute. I don't think we got you unmuted.
Sure, I'll ask another. I know you've made, multiple appeals for people to renew their memberships, even if they're, not attending tournaments. Have you been pleased with that? And, to what degree, maybe it's hard to quantify, but to what degree do you think membership renewal is dependent on tournament registration? I'll leave it at that.
There is a significant subset of our members that join because they want to get tournament play rated. There is another significant subset of our members that are participating because they are in school-based chess programs. One of the things that we saw happen when our spring nationals didn't happen is that our youth and scholastic membership categories fell off a cliff. And these were people who are normally renewing right before the spring nationals. So while the spring nationals being down didn't kill us because they canceled the events that those profits go to pay for, we did take a significant membership hit. So I am concerned what will happen in a month and a half if schools are not back in session and they're not holding chess club and they're not having chess tournaments that they're signing kids up for memberships for. I have that concern. Now, I will say that we have been gratified at the response to some of our online events, and some of this is it's all a new experience for us, but US Chess as an organization, we didn't run chess tournaments. We run some big national events, but we run 5 in a normal year, right? 3 spring scholastics, the K-12, and the US Open. And that's what our national event staff does. Anything else that we're doing, it's typically been a contracted event. Now, we're running directly online tournaments. And while the entry for those is relatively small, it is something that's giving people a reason to belong. And this National Elementary Online Championship, Carol, what were those numbers? We had like...
The last I heard, these were not the final numbers, but it was something like 568 new memberships, new or renewed memberships. That's a lot. 20.
So
25%.
So we've had, mixed success. We've had people who've renewed. We did an outreach back before the IT change and had some pretty good response to that. We went back to people who'd lapsed over the last 5 years, and we had not an insignificant number of people sign back up with us. We also had some of those so that they could come back in and do online play, since we're now, doing more extensive online rating. The other, I lost my train of thought. We had to put a little hold on that. We didn't want to try to do a big deal when we were in the middle of doing all the IT change. So as the IT implementation finishes, I think Carol has a plan with her team to revive that membership outreach. Is that fair, Carol?
Yes.
I see a couple hands up, Ken Ballou being one of them.
Perhaps an obscure question. I'm wondering how much the Amateur Team East tournament represents to U.S. Chess for revenue, roughly.
$10,000 to $15,000.
Actually, we received a check just recently. We had some difficulty with the postal service getting it delivered. It was over 21,000 this year. So
yeah, most years it's between 10 and 15,000. This year was an exceptional year. Now, remember, that's just what we get from New Jersey. How many people become members so they can go play in that event? I suspect the impact is bigger, because there's some people, that's the one event they do every year and they renew their membership to do that. But it's a big deal.
Yes, I'm particularly worried it's not going to happen this year, which will in fact be sad for many reasons.
I understand. John?
To what degree is a philosophy with, if for the immediate future, the growth is obviously in online tournaments. To what degree does US Chess have even just an initial thought on what percentage of this, if any, do you want to be US Chess run events, or do you want to rely on other outside organizers to run tournaments and then rely on them to require US Chess memberships? And is there any fear of cannibalization? Those kinds of issues.
So I think the answer to that, John, is we will follow a very similar model to what we do with over the board events. There are certain events that US Chess doesn't run. In fact, there's a lot more events we don't run that are bid out that others run on our behalf. I could imagine that there may be some number of annual events, online events that would be bid out. I think the big question that is far from being resolved is whether or not we want a lot of online national championships. And I don't think that's a conversation for this town hall meeting, but that's, over the board play confers national championships. There seems to be a reluctance to do that in any widespread fashion online, given some of the concerns about fair play. And so we don't have the answer yet to that, but I imagine it will be a combination where we certainly want our members to run events. We want them to run rated events. They don't need us to run rated events. Many have been doing it long before we ever got into this arena ourselves. So I think we're really, really excited about how much online play there is and satisfying the desires of US chess members throughout the country.
So some of what we're doing by holding just these small events is providing a proof of concept. How does it work? How can it work? And build some demand for US chess rated play. We didn't have to do that with over the board chess. It was there. But with this, there's an element of kind of priming the pump, if you will. So this is this is just me saying this. I view some of what we're doing there as priming the pump. Now, long term, we were headed this way anyway, to a degree. I think what this has done, the circumstances forced us as a team to move down a path that we've been talking about for some time. Not talking about abandoning over the board play at all, but there's a whole lot more people that are involved in online play than there are over the board. And if we're going to serve the entire chess community of the United States, when we have 100,000 members who are playing, and not all of those are playing over the board in a particular year, and we know there's 3 or 4 million people playing online, how do we participate in that? US chess had a checkered history of failure in trying to develop its online play platforms and things like that. And what we've done with our rating system is look to find a way to be platform agnostic. We don't care what you're running it on. We do care that there is a robust fair play system, and we want to give people running events and people participating in events online a little more assurance that the online event won't be marred by fair play problems. And so, part of what our push has been, which we needed to do anyway, we just got pushed harder because of the change in the circumstances brought on by the virus, is to go and partner with ICC and chess.com to look behind the scenes at their fair play procedures. We had a subcommittee go do that and look in detail at what they were doing, to provide some assurance to our ethics process and to inform the other processes of US chess as to how much we could rely on those. We get to the point, one reason there becomes cheating in online chess is it's easier to do it, and 2, the perceived consequences of it are smaller. But the more you have major events that move online, fair play has to be a part of it. And if we couple fair play breaches in the online world with the inability to compete over the board as well, we will heighten the seriousness of the problem, I think. And that's really where we're headed, as we look at it as kind of because players look at it this way, it is a continuum of play. They play here, and they don't care where it is. The younger they are, the more it is that way. So, so I think that's what we're seeing. I think that's what we would like to see happen. I don't think we'll abandon the online world just when we get back to OTB. Look at it this way too. This is getting beyond the budget discussion a little bit, but we've started this online series of informational and training sessions for tournament directors. I hope we never let that go, because that's the perfect place to do it. It's sort of hard to call together people from all over the country, bring them all into one spot and have a TD training session. But it's really simple to do that online. Plus then you captured the silly thing by recording it, and now it's available to a whole lot of people for a long time. So, I think it's been good for us. It's in that way. I hate the cost of it right now to our members and to US Chess for the membership and to our members for the disruption to their lives. But certainly the circumstances, if you try to take a lemon and squeeze some lemonade out of it, it's forcing us to do some things we've been thinking about for a while and knew we needed to do, and now we gotta. So that's not all bad, but it's been certainly a disruption to get us to that point. Probably more than you wanted to know. I don't see any other hands right now. Anybody else got a question or a thought? Carol or Chuck, you got anything else to add to this before we shut it down? Because I don't think we have anybody else with a question right now.
Other than thank you for being on today and showing your interest in the governance process at US Chess.
Yeah, and we hope to see you for our other sessions later this week. And certainly, if not, we'll see you guys on Saturday. And we'll feel our way through that. We do have I think, a pretty full agenda, even though it's certainly limited compared to an in-person meeting. But, the business of the Chess Federation needs to go on. So, we're going to be doing some substantive things at this meeting.
I wish to thank everyone for their patience with the graphs and charts. Sometimes that isn't the most exciting thing to do with your Sunday afternoon. So thanks again. We are very solid as a organization. It caught us doing the right things in US Chess. We're very, very solid. And we have the reserves. We have a board that will look at the budget, and as we move forward, make decisions based on where COVID-19 goes and the ability of our over-the-board play.
Right before,
over-the-board play.
Hold on, Chuck. One last thing before we shut this down. I'm going to share my screen for just a second here.
Okay.
For those of you all who may not be familiar with it, we have set up a Slack workspace for our delegates, and this is for the US Chess delegates. Some of the people here I know have signed up. Some of you have not, but this is a place where you can ask questions and make comments on each of the different things that are on the agenda. And this channel will remain open even during the meeting. So if you have feedback or want to share thoughts between now and then, for example, right here, Ken had some questions about the young adult category, and you can see, we're having a conversation going on there. We've got a little bit, not much here on the trustee indemnification process, but we've got just some different areas there. So if you have comments or questions, that's a place where we're soliciting those and trying to incorporate that feedback or just handle questions as we go.
And Alan, this was in direct response to an inquiry during, I think, the very first or second town hall, where some delegates were asking if we could find a way to connect delegates together, and Slack is familiar to a lot of people. It's free to use, and I think it really meets our purposes, since we're able to separate the conversations into different channels, as they call them, threaded discussion. So
you had your hand up.
Yes, a bit off topic, but just a reminder, please, if you have not yet submitted your conflict of interest form, please be sure to do that as soon as possible so that the committee has time to review it before the meeting. Thank you.
Well, gang, we're coming up on an hour and 25 minutes. Thank you, our hour and 20 minutes. This went better than the first one, which went a whole lot longer.
Absolutely.
If you do have questions or issues, please throw them up in the Slack space and we'll try to get them answered for you.
My thanks to everyone.
Good. Enjoy the rest of your day.